John, so much to talk about. NFL greed on Thursday, Big Ten mess, Pac-12 mess, ESPN, DTC, and
the Pat McAfee deal, including a public shout out for you at the Disney Upfront. All that and more on this week's Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast.
As of announced about 15, 20 minutes ago by New York Post, shout out to Andrew Marchand, weaseling his way into every piece of information there is in the media world. My show, my guys and I will be joining the ESPN universe.
And we're back. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. And John, it was good seeing you last week.
Did McAfee have to call you Weasley? Or come on.
I think that was his way of saying, doing some fine reporting. I hope
a hat tip. It was a hat tip to you, certainly. Yeah,
but that, come on, man. We don't have to use that word. I appreciate that one. And let's get to it. Who's up? Who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
Andrew, I'll lead us off. My who's up, Britney Griner. And I'm going to sound like a broken record here, Andrew, but women's sports is seeing a ton of growth on TV. And we saw it last weekend with Britney Griner's return to the WNBA. She, of course, was detained for about 10 months in Russia on what appeared to be totally trumped up charges. And her return to the WNBA on Friday night was a made-for-media moment. ESPN, they posted their biggest WNBA regular season game audience in 24 years, almost a quarter century. And this is for a game that started at 11:35 p.m. Eastern, and it followed a playoff hockey game. Hockey, generally speaking, is not a great lead-in for women's basketball. So, we've talked a lot about the promise of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, and what they're going to bring to the WNBA when they come in coming years. But with Griner, the league has showed that it is able to cultivate stars.
John, my who's up is Devin McCourty, who was just hired to be on Football Night in America on their pregame show, their studio show from Maria Taylor and everyone else. We talked about this maybe a year and a half ago or so. The McCourtys are coming, and now they're here. I mean, when you think about sports media, you think about NFL media, the McCourtys are going to be a big part of your life. We've seen the success that Jason has had on Good Morning Football. It took him a long time, but he's been the replacement for Nate Burleson on that show that has a nice following and does a good job each morning, being kind of the center focus of the football world in the mornings. And then on Westwood One, he was excellent. And Devin's also going to do some Westward One, some radio broadcasts, which I think is also great if you end up doing TV. I think it's really good if you have that radio background, especially as a play-by-play guy, but also as an analyst. And now NBC sees the potential, and Devin McCourty was willing to put him on a number one crew right at the start. And big things from McCourty. And so who's up? Devin McCourty.
Andrew, one of the fun things about doing this podcast with you is that it was, I think you said, a year and a half ago, you first put the McCourty's names in front of me and as people to watch. And it's been a lot of fun just to see their rise over that year and a half since I first started sort of paying attention to them. So hats off to Andrew Marchand. I think it's all of them, but you should get a cut, I think. My goodness.
It's them. I got some intel that they did really well at the NFL boot camp that they have for guys who are playing or just retired in terms of who want to get into the media. And the McCourtys were the standouts by far. And, people are paying attention to NBC and NFL Network and Westward One. And now those guys have big time jobs.
My who's down, Kevin Warren, the former commissioner of the Big Ten Conference, who is now a senior executive at the Chicago Bears. Did you see Pete Thamel's story on the problems with the Big Ten's media deals? I think ESPN.com posted that on Sunday night, I think. And the new deals, they kick in less than 3 months, and they're not done yet. It's not unusual for these types of deals not to be signed yet because lawyers go through them, but that's usually to dot I's or cross T's. They're still horse trading, according to Thamel's story. They're still like big questions about what NBC has versus what Fox has versus what CBS is expecting. And if you read Thamel's story, Kevin Warren does not come out looking good at all. Here are some of the juicier nuggets from it. The Big Ten owes Fox $40 million because, according to Thamel, and this is a quote, Warren delivered NBC the Big Ten football title game in 2026 without the full authority to do so. Later in the story, he talks about, when you think of the Big Ten, you think about, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Those are the three of the biggest brands in the conference. Well, they're pushing back on the idea that they have to play primetime games in late November when it's cold and conditions aren't great for the fans in those markets. Well, that's news to NBC, which has primetime games through late November. So if they're going to have to be stuck with the Maryland Rutgers primetime game instead of one of the teams vying for the titles, that's not great for NBC. It's not great for the Big Ten. Current Commissioner Tony Petitti is working overtime right now, trying to make everybody whole. And it according to that story, sounds like a big mess.
Yeah, we'll get into that more. That's one of the topics. We'll get to that in a minute. My who's down, Roger Goodell and the absolute greed of the NFL. Thursday night football is now going to have flex scheduling the last 4 weeks of the year. They'll probably only use it once. They're only allowed to use it twice at most, but they'll probably only use it once, if at all. That said, it's gross. There are things, I get it, that these people are only interested in business and making more money and how they can make more money. But sometimes things just don't feel right. And when you ask people to buy a ticket for a Sunday game, and then a month before, now they moved it back from, it was going to be 2 weeks. They moved it back to now 28 days. 28 days before, people who are flying in, people who are making plans forever. Now, it's one thing. I mean, flex scheduling going from Sunday to Monday, which is going to happen this year, is not great. Flex scheduling going from Sunday to Sunday night is not great. Flex scheduling going from Sunday, moving up 3 days to Thursday is ridiculous. Now, I give Amazon and the NFL some credit in terms of how their deal is put together, because we can get into this in the topics, but I do think the NFL is incentivized to have Amazon do well, because I do believe there's a ratings number that triggers a playoff game for a big number that might even be more than the $110 million that Peacock is paying for this wild card game that's coming up this year. And so that was smart to incentivize the NFL to give Amazon a good schedule. But to do this, and I think this is designed, you don't want I get it for their argument would be for the 10 million or so, give or take, that will watch the games late in the season. It's better for them. But you have thousands and thousands of people who are setting their schedule, and especially the people who travel, and NFL fans travel really well. They just basically can't travel, as confidently those 4 days, because it's one thing if, it's a Sunday night, you move from Sunday to Sunday night, or even to Monday, it's not great, obviously, but to go back when you have a flight to go in Friday, and now the game is the day before you're supposed to fly in, that's horrendous. And that's just greed, and Roger Goodell's my who's down.
That takes us right into the topics, Andrew. So if I'm the NFL, and I'm going to take the NFL's viewpoint here, because it is if you bring up the fan that pays for tickets, it's a hard argument to make, to say like this actually is worthwhile. But for the NFL, they want schedule flexibility. So if you're talking about one fan with a ticket, they're thinking about how can we get the best games with the most viewership in the best possible windows? And they have flexibility to do that by moving games from early Sunday to late Sunday, from any time period Sunday to Sunday night. Now with Monday night, which involves staying over and potentially messing up with a work day. And so Thursday night was the only place where they couldn't do that. This is a way for them to do that. And the other advantage, and fans hate to hear this, but it's an advantage for the NFL, is that they want to do whatever they can to make sure that Amazon and YouTube and Apple and whatever streaming service is out there stays in love with NFL programming. So they already know that cable companies, cable networks, they love NFL programming. They see what NFL ratings do for the entire channel. broadcast networks, they already love it. Amazon, they're sort of testing with it right now. And there could be a possibility where they say it is not worth the money that we're paying for it in terms of subscriber acquisitions or actual viewership. So what can the NFL do to make sure that this package stays as robust as it is, so that when it comes up, there's going to be a bunch of people that are bidding for Thursday Night Football, and it's to make sure that not necessarily that it gets the best games, but they keep the dog games out. I would like to bet with these guys. Like, they can decide in 4 weeks what's going to be a dog game versus what's not. I mean, what happens if they go on a winning streak or they go on a losing streak? Or there are a lot of questions about how this works. It's a 1-year deal, so we'll see how it evolves. But I can totally understand why the NFL made this decision from a business standpoint.
Mike Mulvihill from Fox Sports, big time executive there, he had a tweet about that, looking at last year's and, trying to predict 4 weeks out which teams would be good and where to, and you have to look at it. I don't know this 100%, but I presume Sunday and Monday have flex scheduling before Thursday does. So no, they could have good games, so they don't need flex scheduling the weeks that Amazon possibly could meet it, and then they get to protect some games. So yeah, this is basically to take the dog games out. So if you have a terrible game with a couple of 3-11 teams at that point, you can get them out of there. And I get it, as a fan watching, yeah, I'd rather watch a good game in these exclusive windows, but I just think it's just doesn't feel right at all. It's gross. I find it gross, honestly. It's like I just don't really see how, with a straight face. I understand what you're saying, and those are fair points business wise, but you're actually talking about people. It's like caring about your customers. And yes, you could say, well, there's more of the other customers, but these are your most loyal customers who are spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Not everyone has thousands of dollars just to waste or not be able to figure out where they have jobs to pay for these trips. And now the game's on Thursday, it was on Sunday. So it changes your plans. I take some trips sometimes to go see NFL games with my brother, with some friends we've done in the past. And you got to really be strategic in terms of how you plan. I mean, I think I've mentioned this before. A couple of years ago, I was going with my brother Michael, and we were going to travel to see the Steelers and the Chargers. And I said to him, Michael, you know what? Make sure we make our flights for Monday, because it could get flexed in. It's supposed to be a 1 o'clock game. It was flexed in. So, but I cover sports media. So I'm prepared for this. Not everyone covers sports media. I mean, nobody's, not everyone's an expert on this stuff.
By the way, Michael Marchand getting a shout out on the pod. How are you, Michael?
There you go, Mike.
This is a very difficult position to defend because, yeah, you talk about the paying customers and the ticket brokers. But I think my final point on this, in terms of defending what the NFL does a little bit, is that if you go through last year's Amazon schedule, I think there's one game tops that this would affect. This isn't going to affect the entire schedule, and it's going to be a very high bar, and it's going to just make sure that one of those dog games gets pulled out. I think the likelihood is that we're going to go a couple of seasons and not see any flexing on Thursday night.
It was even worth it. That's my other thing, is just to really, like, I get it. I agree with you. They can only do it once or twice, but just to rub your biggest fans' nose in it, and basically they have to change their plans of how they do everything. I understand they could argue more people watch than actually go to these games, so those people are more important. We're helping the greater good. That would be the counter argument. It just doesn't feel right that you're forcing these other people to either not make plans or make plans, and then they could have them totally ruined. Because also, as much as we're into this and as much as NFL fans are into it, not everyone's up on every little thing that happen, every flex scheduling, even if they're big fans, they don't necessarily know about it. And that's, I guess, their own fault in some regards, but I don't think that's great.
Andrew, let's go into our next topic. We teased this in the opening. Pat McAfee giving you a shout out on stage, of course. He finally signed his deal with ESPN. What do you know about that?
Well, number one, I think they wanted him on linear TV, which from 12 to 3 he'll be on, because they feel like what they have there right now, including this just in with Max Kellerman, that the ratings are going to be so much higher that they'll be able to make up for the lucrative contract that they gave them. Now, in terms of the numbers, I have pretty idea of what they are. Still working on that, not ready to report those fully yet. But they're significant, of course. So from ESPN's point of view, though, they already have McAfee for game day. They've worked with him on, with Peyton's company, Omaha Productions, on, the Manning Cast type show for college football. They feel confident that it's going to work out well. The show, he said, is going to be the same, except he's going to swear less, or at least use the F word less. I think they'll bleep that out on ESPN. Not sure how that will work on YouTube. There's some other words they use. And then in terms of the idea of non-ESPN being on the show, it's going to be the Pat McAfee show. I mean, if you've paid attention to McAfee is going to do what McAfee wants. Ian Rappaport from NFL Network, Shams Charania, who's on Stadium and writes for The Athletic. I fully expect them to be on McAfee's show. ESPN's lead insiders, of course, Adam Schefter and Adrian Wojnarowski. I just don't see it. Like, maybe those guys will be on maybe sometimes too, but I just don't think McAfee is going to change. He's gotten to this point being himself. He's been offended by the fact some people have called him a sellout for going to ESPN, which to me, if I were him, I'd treat it as noise, because that's what people do, right? They're just the internet. You can't really go. It's not smart to let other people's opinions shade how you feel. But the fact that they're already calling him a sellout, I don't think that's going to make him dig his heels in even stronger for the way he wants to do the show. And he made it clear in negotiations he said this publicly, that he's going to do the show the way he wants to do it. He's not going to be told what to do. So, how long this lasts, I think it's again, I'm not going to say how many years. I think I know how many years it is, but multi-year deal. Does it make it all the way through? The history says probably not. That hasn't happened. How it ends exactly, I don't know. But you know what? It could be a good marriage. I mean, he made a great point. I mean, he's going to be on even more. He's on YouTube. He's everywhere there. He's going to be ubiquitous, and the chance to grow will be there.
The most intriguing storyline about this to me is why did he leave FanDuel? When he went to FanDuel, that was less than 2 years ago. I had people contacting me asking us to devote an entire podcast to his deal with FanDuel, because they suggested it might be the future of how these types of deals are. He was getting paid gobs of money. He had his control over his own fiefdom over there. And all of a sudden, like, it soured. And so was the money from FanDuel not as much as what was sort of originally put out there? Or what is it that made McAfee decide that I'd rather get in with Disney and ESPN and as opposed to doing his own thing, where he could then do, the WWE and ESPN for College Game Day and all these other things?
Yeah, I agree. But FanDuel's the one who should answer for FanDuel. They're the ones who made this huge deal. I reached out to FanDuel and said I'd like to speak to somebody about, what happened in their point of view. They declined comment. I responded by saying, does Pat McAfee still have an agreement with you? And they declined to comment on that. So they don't know, apparently, FanDuel, if Pat McAfee has an agreement with them or not. Of course, they do know, but they're not saying, and they don't want to talk about this. I don't know. If you sign a deal that's reported to be $120+ million and it's over after 1 year, you probably should say something, in my opinion. I think a lot of these companies, we talk about Apple a lot. I think that they're young. Apple's not young, but I think they really don't. This is a different space. It's a public
They're young
space.
in the sports and entertainment space. Certainly.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different space. And, you're dealing with athletes, and you're kind of leaving a vacuum of what people think. And I think what your question is, look, I talked to or DM'd with McAfee on the original story when I said FanDuel is in question. He's done with FanDuel. I mean, that's obvious. They might not know it, but he's done. They might not be saying it. I said to him, because this is what I've heard, that, he was very upset about the Super Bowl ad, which I could understand it. Like, I probably would just stick it out personally, but he was upset.
Explain what the Super Bowl ad was.
So the Super Bowl ad was for $10 million, and it was like a field goal attempt. If they made it, it's a $10 million deal. They had Rob Gronkowski taking the field goal. They had Adam Vinatieri, who I think is buddies with McAfee. So I don't think he had a problem with that being involved. If you had Pat McAfee on your roster, Super Bowl ad, I think you'd had Pat McAfee involved. I mean, I don't blame him for being like, what the heck? I think I should be in this Super Bowl ad. And And I think, you watch McAfee, I think being in a Super Bowl ad would have been a cool thing. He wasn't in it. He denied that to me, that was like the core of the problem. So maybe it's not that. There was an issue, of course, because he walked away. He took the seal off of his show. The seal was of FanDuel was in the corners, not been there for months and months. Yeah, I think the question really is, does this change the relationship between FanDuel and potential people, entertainers and sports media people? Are we seeing something that's, I think when you look at it from their point of view, gambling wasn't legalized. Again, they're not talking, so who knows? But the gambling wasn't legalized in Texas, wasn't legalized in California. And so maybe he's converted enough people, and it was a big chunk of change. I do think a lot of the people that made the deal have left since then. And so the people who are in charge might be different people. And so that makes a relationship different. And so he leaves and he goes to ESPN, and he's getting a lot of money from ESPN. I'm not sure if it's as much as was reported from FanDuel. Either way, he's making a ton of money. Like it's still a ton of money from what I've heard, but it might not be as much as he was getting from FanDuel. But he doesn't have to do all the advertising and all that other backroom stuff that he was responsible for when it was his own show just on YouTube.
So this reminds me a little bit back when the Yes Network launched, and all of a sudden every single baseball team and basketball team decided that they wanted to launch their own TV network. And this could be a simple case of FanDuel realizing, as a lot of these teams did way back when, it's hard to be in the media business. It's not as simple as just turning on a mic. You have to worry about a lot of different things, back office, behind the camera, in front of the camera, dealing with egos and everything along those lines as well. And there was something, my final point on this is at the ESPN upfront that you and I both attended, McAfee came on, and one of his first comments, he talked about how he started his own business and how hard it was, or how it wasn't necessarily a good business decision to start your own business. And that might have played into it too, where he is really good, like he is really effective as an on-air talent, but to actually run the business is it's a totally different skill set, and it has you sort of tugged and pulled in a million different directions.
Well, and the other thing about FanDuel is that they have FanDuel TV. They're trying to make their own linear network. They have Pat McAfee, who is just going to the, I've said this before, whatever we want to say about ESPN, they're still the Yankees. So Pat McAfee's going to the Yankees. All right. So he's the big free agent. He's the
Adley Rutschman.
Let's just do it. Who has been a Bryce Harper, whatever. Garrett Cole, recent free agent. I'm trying to get my baseball. I was going to say like Jason Giambi at one point there. It's a little bit dated I am. So, but he's that guy. All right. That's what McAfee is. They had him. They had FanDuel TV. I don't know the language of the contract, but you would think that could have been the staple of FanDuel TV if they're trying to make that a thing, to have Pat McAfee. Instead, he's at ESPN. Let's move on. We have a lot of topics. We're going to hit them pretty quickly as we go through them now. ESPN layoffs. They were the second round, whereas this week, what do you know?
They started on Monday. It's not going to be as many as a couple of weeks ago, but it is going to hit a lot of the executives. I think that you and I'm not sure if people listening to the podcast are going to know a lot of these names, but I know you and I will know a couple of these names. And I just wanted to reiterate, it's hard to have a good layoff corporate strategy around layoffs. I mean, it's a bad news story, but this idea of having 3 rounds of layoffs followed by on-air talent just creates this negative storylines. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's just this has been a bad news cycle for Disney and ESPN going on months now. And for the life of me, I don't see any reason why they did this in 4 stages, as opposed to just having like 1 week where everything gets done. It's hard in the best of times, but they're making it even harder. And the press that they're getting out of this, it couldn't be worse.
Yeah, this has been something that ESPN has been doing. This is the 5th time in 10 years. This one's a Disney one. I mean, in fairness to ESPN, this one is a Disney one. I will say, I said last week, it is odd with the McAfee news that they're spending all this money on McAfee. The counter is They didn't do the Big Ten deal. They didn't do MLS. They didn't do Champions League. They didn't do Premier League. So there have been a lot of deals they haven't done. Yes, it's odd because of what's going on with such a big deal for McAFee. And then you have the upfronts, which is all about ESPN. And like I've said a number of times, in November, I think the numbers are going to be really good when they reveal their earnings, which will make people bang their heads against the wall, understandably, because ESPN's still a cash cow. Maybe not as big a cash cow as it once was before cord cutting, of course, but still a cash cow. So that's hard. Let's get to the next topic.
We've been waiting to talk about this one, ESPN's direct to consumer. So our bet is...
Yes. We've had a bet on this. There's even a bet on this. So anyway,
5 years from October of 2021, I believe, right?
Yep. Because it's like a month after we started. I did the newsletter, and then we started this about a month later.
So if it comes before the fall of 2026, Sports Business Journal is going to buy you dinner. And if it comes the fall after, if it comes after that fall, New York Post is going to buy me dinner. And
our guy on Twitter, TV Sports Ratings, also involved. He's jumped on the Ourand side of it. But you've also flip-flopped. But TV Sports Ratings at least has stayed with it and is going with the over. I've done more reporting on it. All right, here's a couple of things. Number one, it's not going to happen this year. Very, very unlikely next year. 25 is probably the earliest it's going to happen, or 26. Still within that 5 years, although if we get into 26, I might be sweating a little bit. And so, but that'd be fun if it gets to there. But still, within the 5 years, it's within the 5 years. One thing that I think is very interesting that was said to me and is really the Sunday ticket deal going to YouTube was a tremendous boon for ESPN. YouTube, Google is spending $2 billion for Sunday ticket. If you get it through YouTube, you get Sunday ticket, you get $100 off. That's a pretty good incentive for people to switch to YouTube. So when you think about it, who's going to switch to YouTube? Well, people have cable. So they might have been dropping cable. Instead of dropping cable, they're getting YouTube. People who don't have cable at all could get YouTube TV. ESPN, Disney's paying $0 for that. Every time someone gets YouTube TV, they get their $10 fees again for all the ESPN channels. So that's a boon, and that could slow things down if it slows the churn. I think also, I think is wrong, is that fact that I think, again, this is the word they use, the demise of cable. I understand cable's going the wrong direction. It's not doing well. It's diminishing. It's going to be less important. The demise implies that it's going to be $0 at some point. And I think more likely it's going to get to 50, 60 million at next couple of years and then going to level off. We already see that. Like, I think if you look at the numbers, they went from, and I don't know if it was year to year, so I don't want to say that, but I believe it might have been 76 to 74 for ESPN. Like the numbers are maybe kind of not dwindling as quickly. And people talk about this article as well, ESPN DTC is going to kill cable, but I actually don't think that's going to happen. Like, I just think you look at it like someone here in New York, let's just say ESPN direct to consumer is $30. Could be more, could be less. Let's say it's 30. The Yes Network now has a direct to consumer, it's about $24. MSG, which is where you get the Yes, you get Yankees and Nets, Rangers, Knicks, all the hockey in New York. That's MSG. It's gonna be $30. All right, let's just call it Yes 30. So now we're at $90. SNY will probably have a product. They'll probably charge $30 a month. Now we're at $120. You know what we're gonna say? You say, you know what? Why don't I get? And then you still have Turner, still don't have FS1, you still don't have HBO Max, which you can get on your cable. You can get that separately too. So I think you start adding
Peacock, absolutely. Yeah, I'll keep
adding.
Well,
but those aren't on cable though. Like the ones that aren't on cable, like USA for a soccer fan, I need USA Network. So then I need some kind of way to get USA Network. I also need Peacock. I mean, NBC is making us pay twice. That's nice of them. For the product they own, we have to pay them twice. ESPN's doing the same thing with ESPN, ESPN Plus. They're not going to make up the money. Like, they're going to make less money, these companies. I mean, it's like, I don't know if it's possible for them to make up the money. Maybe gambling comes in. Maybe there's something else that comes in. But most likely they're going to make less money. But they're not going to die. And cable, I don't think, is going to die. I mean, again, eventually. But just as newspapers have hung on, cable's hung on. We've seen this in all industries that have gotten eaten by digital. And TV's kind of been the last one to be, chomped on. And now it's happening. And it's happening in a big way. But I just don't think it's going to be game changing. Like, I don't see with the Yes Network. I don't see everyone canceling. And I think this is another important thing. Cable, until the streamers figure this out, cable is easier to use. If I'm watching the Mets on SNY and I want to watch the Yankees and they're on Yes, it's easy to flip around. When they're on Amazon, the other day I missed a good Met game because I was watching the Yankees on Amazon Prime, and it's just hard to flip. It was too much work. I could have got my iPad out, watched second screen. I thought about it, but it was too lazy. Okay, but the bottom line is that's going to help cable. People are going to be like, this is easier for me, and you can still stream with cable. I think cable, in terms of people viewing, yes, it's diminishing, but I don't know if demise is the right word.
Even just look at this past weekend. Like, I'm an NBA fan. I wanted to watch an NBA playoffs. You need ESPN and Turner and ABC. You wanted to watch a golf major. I know it's on CBS, which is a broadcast network, but I get that through my multi-channel system as well. You want to see Adley Rushman play for the Orioles. You got to get Masson. You got to subscribe to cable. So cable, to me, I've always been a big believer in the bundle. It's a one-stop shop to see everything. And so I've been flip-flopping a little bit, and it's plainly clear that Bob Iger and Jimmy Pitaro want to go towards streaming. They've been a little less gung-ho about that as they've seen, the streamers not paying as much for programming and start to retrench a little bit, which could be good for the cable bundle in terms of lasting past that 5-year mark.
That gives us a good segue into the next topic, because Fox owns a majority of the Big Ten network, which, as you reported, first made the negotiations for the Big Ten games, the football games, very interesting and different, because you had people like Eric Shanks, the CEO of Fox Sports, and Mark Silverman, the president of Fox Sports, very involved in the other negotiations with the other networks in terms of getting them. And then Kevin Warren, the commissioner of the Big Ten at the time, was involved. And as Pete Thamel, good story on ESPN.com, wrote, total mayhem. So, I mean, I don't know. So, this is what happens. So people understand. When we, report deals are done, usually it's a short, you tell me if I'm right here. It's just short form contract. And then sometimes the long form has to be done, right? Because it's agreed to in principle. Because usually we find out before. And so then they you get confirmation. And then a long form. And usually the long form's kind of formality, although I've heard of certain networks are more difficult than other networks. They take forever. Regardless, it's usually not a problem. It is a problem, though, when you promise the same game to the two different networks and they only play one game. So, which apparently
that's
is what happened.
Problem. That's been a problem for as long as I've been reporting this, Andrew.
So, John, when you look at this Big Ten situation, what do you see happening?
It does appear to be a little bit of chaos within the Big Ten right now, but I can't emphasize enough, the deals are going to get done. NBC is going to have a primetime series with the Big Ten. CBS is going to have their late afternoon, and Fox is going to have their noon. There's still some horse trading going on around that. That's very unusual, but this does not put the deal in jeopardy at all.
And the other question is, that we haven't mentioned it just because if people haven't read about it or heard about it, is that a few teams, Penn State, Ohio State, I think Michigan, didn't want to play in November at night. Obviously NBC's game is prime time, so they had to figure that out, because you can't take just 3 teams, especially 3 of the most important teams, off the board. And because there's a draft, and you can't just say, would they get them early? That's obviously there's a value proposition there that they need to figure out. And, at the end of the day, maybe those teams could play one game at night, every other year or something. It probably could work out, in my opinion. Because you can't just have UCLA and USC playing that 8:00 game every year. USC looks like they might be really good, so perhaps NBC would take it. But those things change.
All right. Speaking of messes and college conferences, Andrew, what a segue this is. It's almost like we planned this out. The Pac-12, still no media deal. What are you hearing?
So ESPN has had no substantive talks with the Pac-12 in a while. The only way I see ESPN doing a deal is if the Pac-12 does something very creative. And when you say the word creative, and you're talking about these big deals that are supposed to be for billions of dollars, at least millions of dollars, that means less expensive, which does not solve the Pac-12's problem. They need to get the money and they need to have the exposure. I do not believe they are going to get that at ESPN. Do things change over time? That's always possible. I never would totally close the door, but I don't foresee that. We already reported Amazon also very, very unlikely, similar circumstance. And so we could keep going down the list. But where this goes, I think we're coming to a head where they're going to have to present something. The ball keeps getting kicked down the field. And it doesn't seem to stop ever. Look, I know this has become like a huge Big 12, Pac-12 fight. I got no fight in the game. Just reporting what I know from people who know what's going on. That doesn't bode well for the Pac-12, and they maybe end up on a lesser network. That's possible, but at the moment, I don't see where they're going. They'll get a deal. I just don't see exactly where that is at this point. Let's finish up with a couple of things here. The NBA Finals, as we speak, the Denver Nuggets are already in. They beat LeBron and the Lakers, swept them tonight as we're taping. The Celtics are going to try to prevent being swept by the Miami Heat, but let's presume it will be Miami and Denver. It's a fun final. I know there's going to be a lot of talk about ratings, and they could have had Lakers and Celtics, so there's classic battle, but this will show some of the power of the NBA if they can get a reasonable number.
I want to propose a drinking game, Andrew. For every time you read about, the NBA wanted Boston and LA or LeBron and Boston to be in the finals and the ratings, you have to take a drink.
I love scotch.
I have to say that for the long-term health of the NBA, and we both agree the long-term health is looking very good. The on-court and off-court storylines around Denver and around this Miami team is going to be more beneficial to the NBA. During his press conference on Monday night, LeBron James, for the first time, sort of hinted about retiring. I mean, we are at that. I know he probably won't.
On video, I just waved my hand. There's no chance. Look, maybe he takes a year off, and then when his son comes in, he plays. There's no way he's going out like this. There's no chance. You think he's just going to retire and never play again? Zero chance.
As an NBA fan, Joker is I will watch him. I will watch him play horse. For Denver, he's just he's a star that the NBA can start to try to build around to when LeBron finally does end up retiring. Jimmy Butler and the Heat, and sort of all those undrafted players and the culture around the Heat. I think it's going to be a fun finals, and I think the ratings might not be as high. Take a drink, but the ratings will be fine for the NBA.
Scotch. Here it goes down into my belly.
I want to end up here with the PGA Championship. Shout out to Live Golf. Brooks Koepka ended up winning it. I know that was the first sort of major championship, first of two that Live has a big win. It's a good news story for those guys. What's your takeaway from that?
Well, I do think it adds to the majors, the Live aspect of it, that this is the place where everyone gets together. So I do think that's really good. But there was an all-time story, and CBS did a good job covering it. I mean, you just have to, there's certain stories, I always say this, if you have a really good story, you just have to tell it. You don't need to write it a certain way or try to do something too fancy with it. Just tell that story, as plainly as possible if it's an amazing story. And they got one with Michael Block. So let's play a clip of Amanda Balonis-Renner talking to Michael Block, who's the club pro, who finished 15th. Really one of the great stories. This might be a movie at some point. But here he is.
You said it yesterday that this was the best week of your life. What do you call it now?
Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate you making me cry. It's amazing. I'm living a dream.
And what you got there, John, is the emotion. And that's what makes sports, makes golf, just makes it beautiful. And CBS did a good job of presenting that emotion. And obviously it's an obvious story, but they recognized it and told it. And hole in one he had, Nance sang Fairy Tale, and then hole in one. That was really a lot of fun to watch.
Well, we are at the end of yet another week for the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media podcast. End of the pod, I want to get a little bit personal, Andrew. I'm taking off for the rest of the week because I'm going up to Holy Cross where you shouted out your brother earlier. I'm going to shout out my daughter, Megan Ourand, graduating after 4 years that flew by at Holy Cross. So it's going to be an emotional scene up in Worcester, Massachusetts, the home of polar water.
Nice. Well, congratulations to you and your whole family. Enjoy that. With you off, I'll try to break as many stories as possible.
And I want to do one more shout out. We got a comment, Andrew, from let me see if I get this right. I got to find out who this is. It's HKJGFJKJDF. He says he wants to request an entire podcast devoted to why the Orioles mascot is the best in sports. I propose that for next week, Andrew. What do you think?
All right. Instead, we're going to have the big get, bring back a big get, Mike Breen, who just won the Sports Emmy for Best Play-by-Play, which probably is the good karma because this was already planned for him to be on. So he got the good karma for being on. Mike Breen next week is the big get. Then 2 weeks from now, John Oren's going to be off. And we have a special co-host. We'll reveal next week, but very going to be a fun one with a lot of media opinions from this person in 2 weeks. So if you can like the podcast, if you can rate it, and if you write a review, it's very appreciative. As always, we want to thank Chris Mason and AC Wyatt, and time for bloopers, I guess. Chris, can we get is there a clock?
Yeah, I have one job, right?
Actually, you have like 20 jobs, but that's one of the 20.
That's one
Chris.
of the jobs is just to have a clock so we know how long we're going.
Actually,
So
Chris, can you start that at 15? Is that possible?
I mean, I can add 15. You can't add 15?
I'm a reporter. My math that's a long time ago. I need a calculator.
You know, there's some other words they use like ASS. I mean, do we say ass on the?
I mean, are we referencing a donkey or like?
Yeah. Okay. So I wasn't sure what the. I know that we have the Ourand style book that we have to follow here on the Marchand.
My kids listen to this pod. They don't.
I'm just doing this for the bloopers now. That's all I care about is being good on the bloopers.